Hi, Dr. Alex here, and welcome to a brand new audiobook release. In this instance, At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft, read by my good thespian friend, Pincent Vrice. And as always, you can see the cover of the audiobook here, although it'd probably be easier to show you an exploded version of the real thing as an image behind me, like this. Rather like the last H.P. Lovecraft audiobook I released, The Shadow over Innsmouth, I wanted this one to be out in time for Christmas, even more so because this book has such a Christmassy feel to it, it being entirely covered in snow, also being set around the turn of the new year, Christmas, back in the 1920s when it's actually set. And so I thought no H.P. Lovecraft story could be more festive than At the Mountains of Madness. Now, everything seems a little out of sync and out of time with, compared with previous releases of audiobooks I've done of this nature. Usually it feels like I've got something else coming out very similar at the same time before it, but not in this case. You will never have heard a version of At the Mountains of Madness quite like this one, or read with such aplomb as is done with Pincent Vrice. That said, as always, he is something of a perfectionist, and so I had to record this multiple times at his insistence until we got it just right. Meaning I had lots and lots of copies of his audio flying around. Who knows, maybe the other copies will become useful at some point. Who knows? Nevertheless, he has produced with me what I think is the ultimate in audio renditions of At the Mountains of Madness. But as usual, it seems best if I read from the back cover blurb for the actual audiobook itself to give you an idea of what it's all about. At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. This is one of the most famous horror novels by perhaps the most famous, certainly most famous American horror author of the early 20th century. A literally chilling tale with an engaging and cleverly crafted cast of characters propelled inexorably towards unwanted discoveries and inevitable insanity. This reading has been produced by Alexander Leiths with the aid of his thespian friend, Pincent Vrice, doing his utmost to capture the spirit of his near namesake. Well, as already mentioned, this is now already available. As with the previous releases, this audiobook is now available from all the best audiobook resellers. Obviously Spotify, as they are the main distributor, although recently Findaway Voices split down the middle into Spotify plus In Audio, which covers all other resellers, at least those of note anyway. And as such, I've had to do it twice in terms of putting the book together, or at least putting the release together. But it is done on all the decent resellers I can speak of. So Spotify, naturally, and through In Audio, we also have Google Play, Kobo or Walmart, and Barnes & Noble or Nook. And doubtless to follow many, many more. Only the most discerning of audiobook resellers, of course. And now it seems only appropriate that I leave you with the audiobook free sample from one of these resellers, and since Spotify is still the most central among all of these, and also I think the most far-reaching in terms of their audience, I will leave you with Spotify's free sample to At the Mountains of Madness, which also is the one that I designed to be the free sample. Some other resellers seem to be a bit fast and loose with their free samples and do something completely different. But anyway, I will leave you with Spotify's free sample. And until the next video, whatever that may be, to all my watchers, viewers, subscribers, and listeners, enjoy this. Fill your Christmas stockings with copies of At the Mountains of Madness, and take care.
Its five-lobed brain was surprisingly advanced, and there were signs of a sensory equipment served in part through the wiry cilia of the head, involving factors alien to any other terrestrial organism. Probably it had more than 5 senses, so that its habits could not be predicted from any existing analogy. It must, Lake thought, have been a creature of keen sensitiveness and delicately differentiated functions in its primal world, much like the ants and bees of today. It reproduced like the vegetable cryptogams, especially the Pteridophyta, having spore cases at the tips of the wings and evidently developing from a thallus or prothallus. But to give it a name at this stage was mere folly. It looked like a radiate, but was clearly something more. It was partly vegetable, but had 3/4 of the essentials of animal structure. That it was marine in origin, its symmetrical contour and certain other attributes clearly indicated. Yet one could not be exact as to the limit of its later adaptations. The wings, after all, held a persistent suggestion of the aerial. How it could have undergone its tremendously complex evolution on a newborn Earth in time to leave prints in Archean rocks was so far beyond conception as to make Lake whimsically recall the primal myths about great old ones who filtered down from the stars and concocted Earth life as a joke or mistake, and the wild tales of cosmic hill things from outside told by a folklorist colleague in Miskatonic's English department. Naturally, he considered the possibility of the Precambrian prints having been made by a less evolved ancestor of the present specimens, but quickly rejected this too facile theory upon considering the advanced structural qualities of the older fossils. If anything, the later contours showed decadence rather than higher evolution. The size of the pseudo-feet had decreased, and the whole morphology seemed coarsened and simplified. Moreover, the nerves and organs just examined held singular suggestions of retrogression from forms still more complex. Atrophied and vestigial parts were surprisingly prevalent. Altogether, little could be said to have been solved, and Lake fell back on mythology for a provisional name, jocosely dubbing his finds the Elder Ones. At about 2:30 a.m., having decided to postpone further work and get a little rest, he covered the dissected organism with a tarpaulin, emerged from the laboratory tent, and studied the intact specimens with renewed interest. The ceaseless Antarctic sun had begun to limber up their tissues a trifle, so that the head points and tubes of 2 or 3 showed signs of unfolding. But Lake did not believe there was any danger of immediate decomposition in the almost sub-zero air. He did, however, move all the undissected specimens closer together and throw a spare tent over them in order to keep off the direct solar rays. That would also help to keep their possible scent away from the dogs, whose hostile unrest was really becoming a problem, even at their substantial distance, and behind the higher and higher snow walls, which an increased quota of the men were hastening to raise around their quarters. He had to weight down the corners of the tent cloth with heavy blocks of snow to hold it in place amidst the rising gale, for the Titan Mountains seemed about to deliver some gravely severe blasts. Early apprehensions about sudden Antarctic winds were revived, and under Atwood's supervision, precautions were taken to bank the tents, new dog corral, and crude aeroplane shelters with snow on the mountainward side. These latter shelters, begun with hard snow blocks during odd moments, were by no means as high as they should have been, and Lake finally detached all hands from other tasks to work on them. It was after 4 when Lake at last prepared to sign off and advised us all to share the rest period his outfit would take when the shelter walls were a little higher. He held some friendly chat with Pabodie over the ether and repeated his praise of the really marvelous drills that had helped him make his discovery. Atwood also sent greetings and praises. I gave Lake a warm word of congratulation, owning up that he was right about the western trip, and we all agreed to get in touch by wireless at 10 in the morning. If the gale was then over, Lake would send a plane for the party at my base. Just before retiring, I dispatched a final message to the Arkham with instructions about toning down the day's news for the outside world, since the full details seemed radical enough to rouse a wave of incredulity until further substantiated.
Masters? Mistresses?
The Doctor requires materials in order to maintain the TARDIS and ensure continued functionality. He similarly requires carbon-based comestibles to sustain his own biological functions and existence. Master would never say this, but he requires aid beyond that supplied by this unit in order to acquire these. To aid the Doctor in his various tasks and creations, this can be most effectively achieved via Patreon or Substack subscriptions, or through donations directly to PayPal. Or if you desire physical goods in return for your contributions, written accounts of my travels with the Doctor are also available on Amazon. Links are in the description below. Thank you, Masters, Mistresses.